Hello and welcome everyone. This is Jackie Casciani of Jackie Casciani Designs. I am so glad you are here today. Today's card has a little twist in that the card front has been cut at an angle for visual interest. You can use any size cut you want. I'm using 2 of the stamps in Altenew's Dahlia Blossom stamp set. You can use whatever stamps you have on hand. I'm placing the stamp on my stamping tool and inking them up with VersaMark embossing ink. I'm giving them a really good coating of the embossing ink. If you don't get good coverage, you can always stamp a second time with your embossing. That's the good thing about having this stamping tool. You'll have perfect placement every time if you need to restamp. Next, I'm removing that center stamp and I'm going to do a quarter turn on my paper and I'm going to stamp again in this right-hand corner. And just a note, if you don't have a stamping tool like this, you can always use a stamp on an acrylic block, or if you're using wooden rubber stamps on wooden blocks, you can use those as well. Next, I'm going to use Altenew's white embossing powder, and I'm going to place that over my embossed images, give them a good coating. I missed a little spots here on the middle flower, and I went back and I added that. Then I'm going to tap off any excess, and I'm going to move my embossing powder. You don't want to accidentally spray that with your embossing tool. I've heated this up for 20 seconds, and now I'm embossing with a heat tool. I'm replacing it back on my stamping tool, and I've rotated it another quarter, inking that back up with the VersaMark ink. Just a note that I used an anti-static embossing bag before I started this. I just did not show that on camera. You want to do that so that your excess embossing powder doesn't stick in places and ends up adhering when you use your heat tool. Again, I'm going to rotate that the final time to get this final corner. Ink that up again with the VersaMark ink. Set that back and stamp again. I want to give it good enough pressure so that you have a good ink the first time. Bring back that embossing powder. And again, as I said, with an anti-static bag, it's prevented excess embossing powder from sticking elsewhere on your card where you don't want it. If you get it on there, you can always use a paintbrush or something to push it off so that it doesn't stick to your final project. Dumping that embossing powder back in the container. You can reuse it over and over again. Heating my tool up for about 20 seconds again and then embossing. It's always nice to see that great white glossy accent. Next, I'm going to use my paper trimmer and cut off a corner of my card front. That piece that you see to the left, I'm going to fussy cut and use later. You'll see me just glue it down. I didn't show the fussy cutting. I'm going to apply some glue to the back of that panel. Give it a good thin coverage on the back with my Tombow mono glue. I'm going to flip that over, paste that to the card front. Next, I'm going to cut off the card base at that same angle right along the edge. Now I've got my front card with that oddly cut front for the visual interest. And then I'm taking another piece of that pink cardstock and I'm placing that on the inside of my card, on the back panel, on the inside. Let's flip that over. I've left about 1/8 of an inch border along each of these panels. You can put it all the way to the edge if you choose. I chose to use the 1/8 inch border. And here was that piece I fussy cut, and now I'm gluing that to the inside left corner, bottom left corner of the backing, because I still wanted to use that pretty embossing. And then I cut, using Altenew's Creative Edges lace die, I cut a scallop border, added some glue here, and I'm adhering it to the inside of the front panel of the card, turning that over from the back. You can trim off the excess on both sides. And now I have this lovely scalloped border on my card. I've cut out 3 love sentiments, glued them and stacked them on top of each other, and then I'm gluing them to the front of my card. You can always use an acrylic block to help you adhere items like this. It makes it a lot easier. And lastly, I'm using Studio Katia iridescent bubbles, and I'm adding those to the front of my card for visual interest and a great impact. This card I gave to my friend for her wedding recently. I hope you've enjoyed these cards. I hope you'll subscribe and hit like. Thank you.